Okay, go.
Hi, I'm Erica Walker.
Hi, I'm Hannah Robinson.
And Samantha Davidson.
I'm Lindsay Sparks.
And I'm Lisa Ball. We're going to go ahead and get started. Um, the first set of questions that we have are Advocate 1 against same-sex marriage. And the question posed was, what principles of effective speaking did you see in his speech? Anybody can jump in here.
One thing that I saw is he had a good hook. He started the whole uh, fire and darnation talk and was just very advocateable in a very negative way. Just telling people how he thought and how people needed to be more righteous and it was either like God's way or the highway, and unfortunately it is that way. But we can't advocate for the family like that. One of the things it talks about later is like if you were sitting on the fence, which way would you lean? I would totally lean against what he was saying because I was just like, what are you doing? Like you're making us all look bad. That's really what I thought. What did you see?
I felt like he was passionate, but he was going about it the way wrong way. He was just attacking everyone, basically. He was just saying, like, basically, like you're in damnation and you're all an abomination type of thing. And even in the presentation by that lady whose name escapes me, I watched it. But she was
Barlow.
saying, what?
Marcy Marlowe.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. But she was saying how, stay away from the religious aspect. We know that's true, but we're trying to convince people that it's good for society, and that's not what's going to come through to people.
Exactly. I didn't feel like there was a whole lot that he said that was effective. I thought that well, I actually looked up like the percentage of people in Iowa that are like, attend church on a regular basis. It's 45%, or at least that was true of 2001. So, like right off the bat, he basically ostracizes like everyone who doesn't, have a religious affiliation, and so that's the majority of the people in the room, most likely. They're, and it seemed like if you watch both of the videos back to back, that there's all these people nodding their heads in the background of the guy who's in favor of, the gay rights, and there was no one supporting him, and it was just a very different dynamic in the room. You could like feel it, I thought. Yeah, some people even walked out. Like there's a lot of people like walking out when he stood up, and I was like, oh man, dude, what are you doing? If I was advocating for same-sex marriage, I would give your, you know what I mean? Oh man. But
Um, it kind of reminded me of, have you guys heard of the Westboro Baptist?
Lisa, your typing is making it go wonky.
Oh, sorry. Is that what I'm doing?
Yeah, just put it on mute when you're not talking, and that won't happen.
Okay.
Um, but have you guys heard of the Westboro Baptist?
no.
Okay. Well, they're the ones who are known in the news for like going around to certain like soldiers' funerals, and they'll come and they'll protest with signs and say, pretty much like God hates fags, like all these horrible, horrible things, and it's horrible. But
At their funeral?
yeah, and so we actually studied the case in my capstone class, and my teacher was bringing up the fact that she's like, a lot of people think that we are like them. A lot of people think that we have beliefs like them. And to be honest, like we have certain similarities with them in the fact that we do not think that legalizing homosexual marriage is what God wants to happen to the country. But the difference is the approach. So these people believe that by putting signs up, but say that at a soldier's funeral, they'll get more media attention, which they do. And by getting more media attention, they get the message out to more people, and so that they can spread the message to more people. But at the same time, are they really accomplishing their goal? I mean, is their goal to just tell people that they're wrong and that they're going to hell, or is it to try and bring them closer to Christ, which is, I think, what we're really trying to do. So I think that he has the right message, but he's going about it in the wrong way and actually is making the message not Christ-like.
Yeah.
Like that.
I agree.
Well, and Christ would never go around saying, God hates you or anything like that. He always reminded people that God loves them, and that's what we're supposed to do is, bring them to the light of Christ and make them feel God's love. But I mean, we're not supposed to condone what they do, but that doesn't mean that we're supposed to unrighteously judge them. It just means that we know their actions aren't good, but we know that God still loves them and that we're supposed to love them. Even if they're not doing even if they're sinning, that doesn't mean we're supposed to hate them or shun them or call them out at their funerals. We're just supposed to love them anyways and make them and try to teach them to come unto Christ rather than force them to believe that they're bad.
Well, and I think when you use words like, an abomination or worthy of death, and, the Word of God says, like, you turn a lot of people off. Like that, they'll just tune you right out the moment they hear those words. So, if that's not something everyone subscribes to and, believes in, then you're losing a whole lot of your audience, and you're not making them believe you. They're tuning you out, really.
Yeah.
I think going along with that is the reason why I think like that was such a bad approach to advocating for the family is he was really forcing his beliefs down other people's throats. That's really what was going down. He was like, this is what I believe, stuff, And so I think that's the side of the two extremes. On one extreme, there's those religious people who are just like insane, and they just go out and they advocate in ways that aren't good. And then there's also the issue that we're facing with this homosexuality problem, like accepting it as a marriage. And I think, like, on one of the videos that we watched, I don't know if it was in this class, but it was Hillary Clinton, and she said that the two things that were the biggest threat to human rights was culture and religion. And she was talking about like how culture and religion are these threats for the homosexual rights, and that's true. But see, like the thing that blows my mind is that they say, okay, culture and religion are threatening people's rights, but instead they're trying to rewrite culture and rewrite religion and say this is a government issued statement on what we're going to teach our children, and you have no say in it, and you can't pull your kids out, and they get all of these benefits and like all these different things that are issued by the government, when in the very first amendment of our Bill of, or not amendment, but the very first section of our Bill of Rights says that no government can institute a religion. This is a religion. It is a form of belief. That's what it is. It's a conscience. But it's mandated by the government in a way that they kind of push away from, by using examples of like the people who protest at funerals and things like that. They're like, religion's bad. Let's do this instead. But it's still a belief. It's still a system that acts as a religion in my perspective, I guess.
And that's kind of what made the case so famous, is because they had the right to do it. Like the protesters had the right to do it. And even though I hate what they were protesting, that's what's kind of great about this country, is that they can, in a way. And it's as horrible as that is, the fact that we have a right, like a right to say something, which a lot of us don't. It's just saying the right things.
Well, it seems to me like that right is becoming less and less, though, even. I mean, in the Prager article that he wrote, it was talking about how at some point, people who believe that same-sex marriage is wrong are going to be viewed as the same as people who are racists, And it's kind of, it's becoming that way where if you speak out against it at all, I mean, you're a bigot, and and you get called all these kinds of names. And, I feel like the world, or at least our country, is stepping further and further away from that right to speak whatever you think. And now it's becoming illegal to say certain things, or to call, everything's, it has to be very politically correct,
That's so true. And like with like that whole right to speak, I remember like one of the ladies that we were reading or watching the videos for that was advocating for that one website. She mentioned like Canada has implemented the same-sex marriage, and now like clergymen aren't allowed to talk publicly, and lawyers and doctors aren't allowed to turn anybody away. So if a gay couple comes into a doctor and says we want to have a child, they can't say that's against my beliefs. So like there are these religious and also speech freedoms that are being taken away as we allow other people to almost like impose their right on us. There's a balance, and we see that in our government. We have the checks and balances with all the different powers that we have. And if we don't do that with our rights, then we're going to have some that are more powerful than others, and the other ones are just going to be overshadowed.
We were involved in the 2008 Prop 8, and it was really interesting to see my kids' take on it. And my son at the time was 11 years old, and he was almost 12, and he was kind of questioning a lot of the reasons that we did what we did, because he didn't understand it. So we tried to explain it to him the best we could. And we stood on the street corner, we held the signs, but before we did that, we made sure that he understood what he was doing and why. And he's 18, or almost 18, he's 17 now, and it's really incredible the changes in his outlook on things, because he's educated himself over the years. And just today I was sharing the videos and the articles with him, and it was interesting to see his reaction to the videos. And it was the same thing. The first kid, he said he needs to understand who his audience is, and that was in our reading this week, that we needed to understand who our audience is, and that was the first thing out of his mouth. And he said, I read some of the things. Did you guys read some of the examples of the war on gender in the article?
Yeah.
For Dennis Prager?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so I read some of those to him, and he just was astounded by the things that are going on in his world. And he said, it's really incredible, Mom. He said, now I understand why we were so adamant about that. And he didn't understand at the time, but he understands now that what it is doing is it's changing his whole world. It's not just letting people be and letting people love and letting people be who they are. It's about redefining his entire world. And it was really profound to hear him say that. So I was glad I shared it with him, actually.
Yeah, I'm glad you did too. And like that was like one thing that I was reading about. Were you talking about? Was it the Dennis Prager? Is that the article you were talking about, Lisa?
Right, yeah.
Yeah, and I was like, the biggest thing that I loved about that article is he pointed out the two different questions from the two sides. One of them was more focused on like personal rights, and the other one was more focused on the betterment of society. And I think to be able to properly advocate for the family, we have to understand that that's what they're concerned about. They're concerned about the rights of those citizens. And so I think one way that we can do that is we can let people know that it's not okay to discriminate in the way that they're comparing it to like racism. No, like you're not allowed to. Okay, you're allowed to do whatever you want, but it is not socially acceptable to us who advocate for the family to shut those people down, to put them in the little corner and say you have to stay here, or do things like that, or to abuse them. But I don't think it's a fair comparison to compare them to slavery, to people who were beaten and starved and lost their lives and taken away from family and taken away from their continent. You know, like to take such a stand and slap something like slavery, a label on it, it's almost insulting to me to what the African Americans went through. You know, and when we try to compensate for that now, we don't go and we don't say, okay, now teach me all of your beliefs, let me implement that into my life. We say, okay, let's try to help them out, let's see if we can help them out financially, let's give them more scholarships, let's do things like that to better their lives, not how can I take their lives and put it into my own. And that's kind of what we're doing with this homosexuality.
Yeah, I think we've all pretty much covered what the first guy did wrong. I personally wanted to tune him out when I first started listening to him. In fact, I had to watch that video several times in order to figure out what he was talking about exactly. I mean, I knew he was passionate, and I knew it was the fire and damnation speech, but I wasn't following him, so I had to tune him out and start over again. But the second speech was kind of surprising to me because I was all set to not like it. But I think the guy did a really amazing job at persuading. So what do you guys think?
For sure. Can I jump in first? Okay, so what I thought was, well, so he kind of went through almost the same format as what Marcia Barlow kind of told us was the way to sort of tell a story, because he begins by, introducing himself, where he comes from. He kind of he makes light of the situation, like he made a joke about how cute he was as a baby or something. Anyway, he speaks about his family and how they're no different than any other family because they attend church and they eat dinner together and they go on vacations and they face struggles or whatever. And then he kind of brings it to the people, I guess. Not to the people yet. It was the we statement where he brings up the question, can gays be good parents? And then he tells about himself, how he's an Eagle Scout and how he's going to college and he's a business owner and all these things, and then that he's no different than any other children or any other child, and that the one guy would be so proud to have him as his son, and that families are, he goes on to talk about how families are bound by love, and that's where he sort of like includes everyone. And they're like, yeah, families are bound by love, not by the government. And he brings the issue kind of to the people of Iowa, like, this is your chance to vote on this historical thing. And, just, I don't know, he kind of went through the list that way, and he ended on a really good note with, that no one could ever single him out as being raised by two gay women because, it didn't influence his character or whatever. And so, I don't know, just, it was, overall, I thought it was really powerful, honestly. But, if I was on the fence, I would certainly be voting in favor. I'd be like, oh yeah, well, he's normal, why not, and because that's usually the argument on our side. It's like, well, what about the children? What about, how are they affected? And he kind of basically just knocks that whole argument out of the park. Like, it's no big deal. So, I don't know.
I'd like to jump in here. So I'm actually a child of divorce. My parents divorced when I was really young, and I traveled between houses my whole life. My parents have been divorced, and then I have step parents, and my dad's been divorced twice now, and so I have brothers who have gone through a divorce again from my dad's second marriage and stuff. So I mean, I'm not an advocate for divorce, even though like I'm from a divorced family. I'm not going to be like, I turned out great. I'm a member of the church. I'm married. Like I have all these things going for me. I'm about to finish school. I've never been a delinquent. I've never been into drugs and all these other things that people say that children of divorce are prone for. So, but I'm not about to go around and say, get divorced. It's no big deal. I mean, it's kind of that type of thing, saying like divorce doesn't affect the children because I turned out okay.
And I was just gonna say that same thing. I too, my parents were divorced when I was 11, and I've turned out okay, but some of my siblings haven't. They really struggle. And I think the thing that he He does really well with the whole people skills. He talks with feeling. He doesn't yell. He makes eye contact. He uses hand motions. He's charming. He dressed sharply. You know, he looked the part. He spoke the part. But he had no statistics to back himself up. It was all, I'm okay, so obviously it's okay.
Right, and you can't be one person saying that everyone's okay. You're just one person. That's not a case study for everybody who goes through that.
And like with like legalizing marijuana or different drugs, they're like, hey, I'm okay, or I don't wear my seatbelt, I'm okay. That's not a good excuse. Just saying that you're okay, it does not mean that it's okay for everybody or the society at large, because you could be the exception. And in fact, with a study that has been done, he is the exception. And that's the sad thing, is that people are getting convinced by the exception and not by the rule.
I have to back you up on that, Samantha, because I saw some similar studies, and I had a class a little while back where we did some studies on that and children of divorce. And the statistics are overwhelmingly not in favor of the children turning out as good as you guys did and as good as this kid did. He is the exception. And it is one of those things that it's a conscious effort, and it doesn't, unfortunately, affect all children the same way. But the statistical studies show that these children are not doing well.
And that's one thing, okay, sorry, I'm going to get on a soapbox really fast. That's one thing that drives me insane. There was a doctor who, not a doctor, but a professor at Texas A&M who did a study, large scale, had 3,000 people throughout the nation, polled the people, and if the children, like he asked children between the ages of 18, well, it wasn't children, it was adults, 18 to like 39 or something like that, if they had ever lived like with their parents, if either parent had ever had the same like relationship or a relationship with somebody of the same gender. This doesn't mean they were married or anything, but this meant that they grew up with homosexuality in their home. And he said that with that poll, he was able to find all of these things that were negative towards the children as they grew up in this thing. And there's so many people who called for him to be fired and to lose all credibility and everything because of things that his study could lead to. But he never said, okay, this means that homosexuality is bad. He didn't say, you know, he didn't make big claims from what he had. He mentioned that, hey, you know, this understands that marriage was not allowed, and so this makes a lot more of a stressful home environment, which can add other causes to the children. But he was just saying, this is what we've seen so far. And everybody just jumped down his throat and was like, get him fired. And I saw so many like reports and news things, and it makes me so sick. He's a scientist doing scientific work. He was funded by people not against homosexuality, but for homosexuality. So it wasn't like he had this agenda that he was working for. And he was a scientist who was trying to find research to help people answer this question that they've been struggling with. And that just kills me, that because it's against what they view, they automatically assume that it was wrong instead of giving it a consideration or a moment of thought.
Well, when that is the only factor that is kind of hanging in the balance, it hasn't been going on long enough for anyone to really have any real answers about it until now, and he's the first. So of course they're going to jump down his throat, because he is the first person to come up with any kind of evidence that this is not going to work out, that this is not the right way for children to be raised. So, and they don't want to hear it. They want to hear that everything's normal, that, you know, there's no problem having them raised by two women or two men. And so, I mean, I'm not surprised that this happened to him, but it is frustrating.
But it's not like he's the only one either, because I took a class last semester where there was a guy who was saying how he's done all these studies and he's kind of been silenced by the community and his things aren't published. And I even was able to go through one of the published articles about how, you know, the kids don't suffer from the being raised in a same-sex household, and that's what you see most of the time is like, oh, see, the kids are fine, and that's what the studies show. But one of my teachers had us actually go through and look for like how big their sample size was and where they got the people and who, and the way they picked people was like really particular and meticulous. They picked certain people to be in their studies. It wasn't like a general broad study of they're very biased studies. So it's really hard to find a non-biased one, especially if it turns out the other way, that it's against it, like not helpful to children. If they find a study with that, it's kind of silenced. And there was even one guy who gave this presentation, I think it was on I want to say a TED Talk, but that's probably not right. But he was saying that he has said a lot of things against the children being raised in same-sex households, but like other researchers will come to him and say, hey, I found this, but I'm not putting my name on it because I don't want to have all these negative things towards me or my funding taken away or all that other stuff. So he will publish stuff that other people have done just because his name's already tainted by this. So it's even researchers are afraid to put their names on things.
You know, I had, that I can recall in the 10 years that I've been teaching, I've had 3 children who are, have been raised in same-sex households, and by lesbian couples and 1 by a gay couple. And all 3 of them, you know, I mean, I'm only doing a sample of 3, but from what I've seen, all 3 of them had some serious behavioral issues. And we couldn't figure out for the life of us why these kids were, you know, so utterly obnoxious and trying so hard to get attention. And they were actually some of the most obnoxious kids in our entire school. And I looked back on it. It didn't dawn on me at the time, but I looked back on it and I realized that they were not raised in a traditional household. And that could stand for any other, you know, we've had parents also who, the children are raised by the nanny, and that's a big issue, is that these parents don't know their children. And so, but I just noticed that in these 3 particular children, there were some serious behavioral issues, and I'm wondering how many more out there are the same way.
I've got one question. Like when I was watching, it was the second speech, the one with the guy that was very convincing. He mentioned that he had a sibling who was a girl who was like fully related to him. He was like, and for me, that's pretty cool. I don't understand why that's important in that perspective, because like I don't know. Can you guys help me understand that? Because I don't quite
He
understand
came
why.
as a sperm donor, and so the same guy donated for his sister. So they have the same biological father.
I know, and I understand that, but why is that important? If it doesn't matter if kids are raised by 2 women or 2 men, why
I
is
see what you're saying. Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
I don't understand. I mean, it's
Well, because deep down, he's searching for family, you know? He wants the family that he doesn't have. And, you know, I mean, that to me was an indicator that family's important to him. And although, yes, you can make your family who it is at the time, you know, because some people are just raised under circumstances they can't help. And I understand that. But this was a definitely deliberate arrangement. And he was searching for family. I think it's our nature. That's a good question.
And I wonder, like, I wish, okay, I don't want there to be more availability so that I could do a kind of study, but I wish that I could do a study to see, you know, like, if it's 2 moms, is the child, or 2 dads, is the child or the children more attached to the biological versus the one that is the partner, or like what happens with that, you know? And it makes me so confused. Like I don't quite understand some of the things with that, because like with like the father-daughter dances that they talked about canceling. Did you guys read about on that? Is that this class?
Mm-hmm.
Like the
Yes.
father-daughter dances that they had and they canceled and stuff like that. And there is that desire to spend time with your children, but there's so many new ways to do it. It seems like there's so many new ways that they're trying to say, like, hey, anything works, and it doesn't matter if you're a boy or a girl. But now there's boy or girl or other or transgender or all these other options that you can choose from. When it comes right down to it, you're either a boy or a girl. I mean, born, you know. and then if you do alterations, then you're a boy or a girl, you know. So I don't. I guess
Yeah,
that's
how can you be another? What is other?
Yeah, there are only two. I mean, even if you decide to change your gender, you're changing to the other one. It's only
yeah.
two.
Right.
And so that's what I don't understand is that they're trying to say gender doesn't matter, but I don't know. I think like back to the racist thing, they're saying, you know, like with racist, black and white is the same. That's true. You know, the only difference is pigment of skin. But with boy and girl, there are some different physiological aspects of boys and girls. And I was reading this thing, and girls, they do a lot better under stress at calming themselves down. While when guys are under stress, the ones that survived in back like with the caveman era, you know, were the ones that kept that adrenaline going so that they could escape or protect their families or whatever the case may be. And so like guys and girls are genetically different and they react to different situations in different ways and that I mean, there's no like stereotypical girl that fits all or stereotypical boy that fits all, but there are just some things that can't be ignored. And I feel like that's what we're trying to do, and I don't understand how that comparison between race and gender is made. But
If you've ever had a baby boy and a baby girl, which I've had one of each, you will see the complete utter difference in how they react to things from day one. I remember my son would get angry if he didn't get his food, his bottle, if he didn't get nursed, he would get angry. And his cry depicted that anger. And then my daughter would get her feelings hurt. She would cry in this pitiful little cry. And of course, you know, that was something that always got to everyone, but especially Dad. But it's just one of those biological things that is inherent in them. And so you're right, they do have complete differences in the way they react to things, how they handle things, and they still do at 14 and 17. They still have different ways of dealing with things.
It's interesting. My husband's an educator, and he's found that exact same thing. He actually got a book from his teacher that's called Why Gender Matters. I don't know if you read it, but it's all about how in education, men and women are different in how they learn. It's just they're completely different. Our brains are different. It's not just our body parts; it's our brains. It's a lot of different components, and I think that confusion, Samantha, that you're feeling is just rampant in our society. Satan is literally trying to confuse us on every single point of the family. He's trying to confuse us on our gender. He's trying to confuse us on our sexuality. He's trying to confuse us about the mother and father roles. He's trying to confuse us about children. I just feel like it's a tool. It's an absolute tool that he's using to just make it be like, but it doesn't make sense. Like, I just like, especially with the speech that she gave in the Harvard business class, and she talked about how she wore the pin called motherhood, and she had women hissing at her. I mean, it's just, our society has just completely gone insane. I mean, it's just this idea like, I can't be a woman and have worth and be a mother. Where in the world? How did we get so backwards? And it's just Satan.
You know, feminism started out as just women wanting equal rights. We wanted to be able to work and get paid the same. We wanted to be able to vote. I mean, that's what feminism started out as, is just equal basic rights of owning land, you know, stuff like that. Now it's gotten to the point where we want to be men, to the point of, oh, you're a stay-at-home mom? What do you all do all day? You're just sitting around watching TV, eating bonbons, doing nothing. And it's like, I don't know if you guys realize, but like my mom has been a stay-at-home mom since, well, before, when she got married when I was like 10, so she worked before then. But after she had my brother, when she got remarried to my stepdad, she's been a stay-at-home mom ever since. And so, and a lot of the times, like, my aunts and uncles will be like, oh, will you watch my kid all day? And my mom's like, I've got like a billion other things to do, because people think that she's just sitting around doing nothing.
I think that's part of when Marcia Barlow talked about how you know, the pro-family movement needs people that understand the issues and can effectively communicate them. I guess I hadn't really like considered what our movement was lacking, but I mean, it really is good communicators, because if you think about it, most of the people who believe in the pro-family movement are people with their own families. Most of them mothers who, you know, they chose to raise children and, you know, be in the home rather than pursue a degree and a career. So we have this whole, you know, group of people that they believe the same as we do, but they don't really know how to, I mean, in the eyes of the world anyway, they're uneducated, and so they don't know how to take a stand and effectively communicate what they actually believe.
Right, they don't know how to articulate what they want to say, and they feel passionate about it, but they don't know how to put it into words. You're right. I was thinking about the examples of the war on gender that oh, what was his name? Dennis Prager gave. And I was thinking to myself, if the first guy had taken those things, those examples, and incorporated it into his speech, what an amazing speech he would have had, because those were compelling arguments. Those were things that were legitimate reasons to be concerned about this. And those were the things that I read to my son that made him go, wait a minute, what's going on with my world? So he's starting to think to himself, are my children even going to be able to refer to their parents as mom and dad at school? I mean, he even asked that question. So it was really kind of interesting, and I thought about it, and I thought, oh, if that kid had had this information and had his facts straight, and if he could have articulated himself more on an intellectual level as opposed to the fire and brimstone, nobody wants to hear a preacher get up there and start yelling at people. But if this kid had gotten his facts straight, he could have been just as compelling as the other kid.
I think that's the tricky thing and also the scary thing. I remember, like, when we were talking, or like one of the videos mentioned that people were like, hey, in 30 years when all the current advocates are gone, then we'll have a free reign. And I'm like, no, because that's our turn to step in. I'm like, it's a little intimidating, because I'm like, I've gotta understand, and I've gotta be willing to stand up. And even if I personally cannot make a huge difference, I've got to make whatever difference I can, because as soon as we stop, that's when we give up. And that was one thing that I was talking to my husband about this last time in Sunday school class. They were going through, in priesthood, they were going through the Joseph Fielding Smith manual, and the lesson that they were on, one of the quotes was talking about how we're not always going to have statistics on our side. Right now we do, but we're not always going to have the Word of God make sense. But we still have to advocate for it. So I think right now we're in a time that we're really blessed to be able to have all of these tools to use to help people see that we're not just saying this because we've been brainwashed since birth through religion, but we're saying this because this is an actual thing we need to be concerned about, and an actual thing that shows that affects our society. I mean, you can't say that you're going to redefine the basic unit of society and not change it, you know? And so there's got to be consequences either for good or for bad, and we're here to protect what we know is right. And we don't always know why we know what is right, but we do know that God loves his children, and that because he loves his children, things will work out. And we just have to be able to be willing to open our mouths. That's what they tell missionaries all the time. You have to be willing to open your mouths. You study because you have to learn before you can teach. But then you just open your mouth and you wait for it to be filled. And that's, I'm afraid, what we're going to have to do.
Okay, I guess we're kind of at a pause here, but I just wanted to ask if anybody would like to sum up what we've discussed tonight, because we've kind of already gone through the questions. We went way out of order, but we covered them all. Would you guys agree? And if you guys have any other questions that have come up, then we can address those. Okay.
Okay. The only other thing I really was wanting to talk about was that I agree with everything Dennis Prager said. I thought that his beginning argument about how he refuted the argument of the pro same-sex marriage people. He did a good job of that, but I didn't feel like his argument in favor of man-woman marriage was all that strong. I felt like there was sort of a disconnect between gender and its like relationship to society. He was like, same-sex marriage is bad for society, and then he goes into all these things about the war on gender. But I didn't really see where he didn't really talk about why gender was important. Did anyone else feel that way, or is that just me? I don't.
No, I totally agree. That was one of the things like I wrote down in my notes. Like one of his weakest points was that he didn't include studies. He didn't do facts or anything or why it was not beneficial. He just said it's not beneficial and like this is why gender is important. But he didn't actually say, okay, this is why family is important. And that's where it kind of fell off. So he was convincing, like the other young man, he was convincing, but he lacked having that statistical evidence with him. And that was like one thing that was it Barlow, I think, mentioned is like you need to be passionate and you need to have a good story and you need to link it with statistics. And if you got that, you've rocked it.
Sure.
I felt like too, he was all over the place. Did you guys feel that way?
Yeah.
I didn't feel like it was very well organized because I started to read something and I'd say, wait a minute, is this guy for or against? And then I would start reading more and I go, oh, okay, gotcha. But it would take me off track. And then I would start to read like, the examples. And then I said, okay, I know exactly where he's coming from. But for a couple of paragraphs, I was a little wondering, I was a bit concerned about where it was actually going, and it didn't seem to flow. I think that was the biggest thing, is it didn't flow for me as well as it should have. And I thought maybe it was just me, but it sounds like you guys are on the same page here. So, were there any other questions about anything that we watched or read, or anybody want to add anything else? No? Okay. We need someone really good to summarize. Hannah, you did it last week, and you were awesome. So is anybody else interested in just kind of summarizing what we just talked about? We didn't discuss that at the beginning. I'm sorry. Should have set that up.
I'm willing to. Were you taking notes the whole time?
I was trying, but I didn't want to mess up our audio. So.
Okay. I was obviously here for the whole thing and listening, but
yeah.
I don't know. I wasn't taking notes because I wasn't thinking about that. Can you send me whatever you typed up, and I'll just add whatever left off?
Well,
all we really need for the summary is just saying, okay, so for the first video, this is what we talked about that we're good and bad. For the second video, this is what we talked about that we're good, but
yeah,
bad statistics.
It doesn't need to be long, just basic.
Okay.
Yeah.
Just like
yeah, like 350 words or more than that.
Oh no, just like a verbal recap.
Yeah, you just say it. Yeah.
Oh, I say it.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, guys, I was not here last week.
And like maybe what, 2 minutes? Like Hannah, did you do 2 minutes last week? Not even.
Yeah, less than that.
Yeah.
And where do I post it to?
Just say it.
Do it at the end of our video here, and then we'll turn off our mics, and you just go, and then Lindsay will turn it off from there.
Okay.
Sound good? You can do it. I'm sure you'll be great.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay, go for it.
Like now? Okay. So in summary, we talked about how the man who was against same-sex marriage, he took too much of a religious stance. He was all fire and brimstone and kind of isolated his audience and wasn't really, had a lot of people turned off to him, essentially. The things that he did well, he was passionate, he, I don't know, he was passionate. We'll give him that, okay? but besides that, just his argument altogether was not that effective for those who were listening, even those who are religious. The advocate for same-sex marriage, he was, I felt like he was a very strong communicator. He, used feeling words and a lot of examples of himself and his family and how they're normal. And people believed him essentially after listening to him. You wanted to sort of vote for same-sex marriage, but some things that were brought up were that just because he's normal, it doesn't mean that everyone else is, and he is more of the exception than the rule of this type of family situation. So there's that. And then with the Dennis Prager article, we talked about how he brought up that racism is not at all the same as same-sex marriage, and that it cannot even be compared because they're really not on the same level at all. And then we talked about how I don't know. We talked about how the things that weren't really effective in his article were that he jumped around a lot, and there wasn't a great flow to his article. But he did have a lot of great examples of the war on gender and how that is affecting the same-sex marriage argument, I guess, in society. So, does that work? We done?